Well, I'm continuing with the relating my experiences that I had during national service and some of my post-national service experiences in the South African Defence Force, in the camps that I had on the various operations we did. Just to mention a few things, transitioning now from OneSci, the South African Infantry Battalion base, to junior leadership course. Right at the end of the basic training, I mentioned that there was this huge gathering at a building at OneSci, but included the whole Tempe base, the 1 SSB Special Services Battalion, the armored vehicles, and also the Parabat unit and various other units. And I was asked to give my testimony. Just an interesting aside on that, I decided to just mention, instead of giving personal testimonies, something about what the gospel is and how we are to look at it. And I used those verses in Ecclesiastes. Right at the beginning, the preacher, the son of David, says, vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. And I just use that to say that life, in and of itself, not seen in the light of living with a creator, with a purpose to serve him, leads to a certain vanity in this life, which is meaningless. And then went from there and moved from there, just said I related to that in my conversion, and moved from that to right at the end of the book, where the preacher then says, let us hear the conclusion of the matter, of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And just saying that this is really what Jesus Christ does when he calls you into obedience to him. It's freedom from the law, in the sense that you don't do things to save yourself, but it's the blessing of fearing God and keeping his commandments. And that's the whole really duty of man, is to aim at that. But after presenting that, the adjutant of the unit of 1 South African Infantry Battalion, he's the man who is really like the secretary to the head of the unit, the colonel. He came up to me afterwards and said, thank you very much. He had become a Christian, and he says it had been so life-changing because as a NCO, a non-commissioned officer, as a sergeant and then as a staff sergeant, many times, he mentioned something like 3 or 4 times, he was on his way to further promotion and then he was demoted, either for misbehaving or assaulting troops. I think it was mainly assaulting troops, which was a common thing during national service or during one's army experience. That's just how things were. But to get charged with assault was something really significant. So obviously he was a man who struggled with himself, but he came to salvation, and he said if it wasn't for him becoming a Christian, he could never have become an officer. And after becoming a Christian, he then did officer training, and he was then a full lieutenant as adjutant to the Colonel Gert van Zyl. So I'll mention something of some of the more significant soldiers in the South African Army that I knew about or had some experiences with during my career there. I also mentioned that I chose to do a junior leadership course. Now, you could, when they came and chose you to, offered you the opportunity to go to Parabats or to join the dog squad or whatever it was, you could also choose to do your junior leadership at Oudtshoorn, which is the South African Army's flagship leadership school, at infantry school in Oudtshoorn. Or you could choose to do the junior leadership course at Mechanized Leader Wing, which was a junior leadership unit created to supply officers and NCOs to the mechanized infantry, to one side. And I chose to go that route. Now, Mechanized Leader Wing was also, certainly among ourselves, and how widely known it was a tough course, tougher than infantry school. And why I say that with some certain confidence is, towards the end of my junior leadership course, I then took the opportunity to do an extra course on mortars. And for that course, I went down to infantry school in Oudtshoorn, and for the practical part, we did an operation up on the border at a place called Oshavello Gate. So more of that nearer the time. But be that as it may, I chose to go to Mechanized Leader Wing, just in the Tempe base in Bloemfontein, and there started my junior leadership course, eventually becoming an officer, a junior lieutenant. And others, at some stage in the course, you all did the same course. At some stage, they separated you. You became an officer, or you became a non-commissioned officer, a corporal, sergeant, staff sergeant, up through the various sergeant major rankings you could go. Something also recall is that, and I cannot remember if that was during basic training or just when we started the junior leadership course with Mechanized Leader Wing, MLW, I'll refer to them as MLW. We had I think it was a 15-kilometer run with a company, or a 21-kilometer, I can't remember, but what you had to have was your webbing, that piece of additional equipment where you carried your magazines and your water bottles. So you had to use this webbing, you had to fill up your water bottles. I think it carried 2 water bottles, maybe more, and then 5 magazines, which with the magazines carried 5.56 rounds each. And then we went on this run. I think it was a 15-kilometer run, but it happened to be on my 21st birthday. And I just recall that for some reason I finished second out of I think it was the company that ran it. I don't recall it being a huge number, more than say 5 platoons that ran that. And anyway, I came second, and it was my 21st birthday. So somehow they knew about that. And then they said, okay, well, you can eat first, which meant that instead of eating second, I ate first. I just recall that happening. So that was my 21st birthday present. Anyway, then the junior leadership started. We had really good training and good practical training, because in our national defense of South Africa, most of the conventional warfare took place on the Southwest Africa, which is now called Namibia, Angolan border. But I'll explain more of that later, and why we had that kind of quality of leadership, and how that all played out next time. Thank you.